The Doctor. In the TARDIS. Next stop, everywhere.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Charles Skaggs, back in the TARDIS, ready to talk some more classic Who with my wonderful partner in time, wonderful friend, and someone who I delight in spending Wednesday evenings with, Jesse Jackson. How you doing, Jesse?
I am great, Charles. I am so excited for three reasons. One, our two guest companions are rockin' Whovians that I love talking to. And third, I adored this episode. This was so much fun. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking about this one.
All right. So without any further ado, let's introduce our wonderful special guest companion. So returning from, Ghost of the Twin Peaks podcast and Drunk Cinema, my wonderful co-host on both of those programs and wonderful friend and just someone who I also enjoy talking to, Xan Sprouse. How you doing, Xan?
I'm doing good, Charles. I still have the glue in my hair from my sleep study last night because I've been too exhausted from it to take a shower. But other than being, I'm fine. At least I'm actually hearing, not just on a video monitor. So
that's right.
I mean, I am technically, but I'm actually talking to you in real time. So
well, I definitely appreciate that. You know, Skype permitting, of course, right?
Skype permitting, of course. Yeah, Skype's the boss. Skype is the ancient god that imposes its will on us when it comes to podcasting.
Yeah.
So apparently we need to do a sacrifice. Also joining us from the Five-ish Fangirls podcast, once again, one of our favorite emailers and also favorite special guest companions, Holly Mack. How you doing, Holly?
Doing good. Can't complain. Excited to talk about this episode. I, like Jesse, enjoyed it immensely.
Excellent. So what we're doing here at episode 225, we're discussing The Three Doctors. One of my personal faves from the Jon Pertwee era, way back from 1973. And this was the first serial, season 10, written by Bob Baker and Dave Martin, the creators of K9. So hooray for all you K9 fans. And they previously wrote the story The Claws of Axos and went on to write other great stories like The Centauran Experiment, The Hand of Fear, which was Sarah Jane's last story on Doctor Who, at least the regular story, The Invisible Enemy, which introduced K9, and The Armageddon Factor, the last chapter in the Key to Time saga from Tom Baker's run. And this was directed by Lenny Mayne, and of course stars Jon Pertwee as the Third Doctor, and Katy Manning as Jo Grant. So before we get into anything else, I got to know, obviously it sounds like Jesse enjoyed watching this, I'm presuming for the first time, correct?
Yes, this was the first time I had seen it, and was just really, it made sense, why you got the doctors together. Mm-hmm. It was a very understandable storyline. It wasn't overly timey-wimey. It was just a really good episode.
Yeah. And Holly, what about you? You also said you were enjoying this one as well?
Yes, it was my first time watching it, and I was getting some of the 50th anniversary vibes just from some of the stuff that was tying in. I was like, ooh, little did they know that's going to be used as a callback.
Well, that's interesting. You've never watched this one before. That's
No, this is my first time watching it.
Because I know you've watched a lot of classic Who, so I'm kind of surprised by that.
Yeah.
And Xan, how about you? I'm guessing you haven't watched this one in a long, long time.
It's been a while. It's been it's been a good decade since I've seen this one.
Okay.
But I love this episode. When I saw that you were planning on doing this and you were entertaining the concept of volunteer guest companions, I
Right.
jumped at the chance because I love this episode. I love that we get all three of the doctors. Well, like I've been calling
2
this
and a quarter,
episode,
maybe.
It's two doctors in a Zoom call, is what it is.
That's
Yeah,
right. Yes.
The
pretty
doctor
much.
does have, he's got COVID. He's got to socially distance.
He's socially distancing, exactly.
Yes.
So
He's
I
got
love
time
that.
COVID.
One thing I just really think is really interesting about this episode is how when the doctor meets himself again,
Mm-hmm.
you really see how megalomaniacal the doctor really is.
Yeah.
And how he's just so desperate to be right all the time, even if it's against himself. And I
Now,
love
which
that
doctor
aspect
are you
of
referring
character
to?
development.
Are you saying that the third doctor is megalomaniacal, or just all of them?
I mean, the doctor in general is
Okay.
kind of a megalomaniac. He's very self-important. I don't want to call him a narcissist,
Right.
because I don't think he does the gaslighting. I mean, he does the gaslighting thing a little bit by keeping his companions in the dark until part 4 of the story. But he eventually, he eventually does let them in on it, and his
I'll explain later.
I'll explain later, but his motives are always to help his companions. He's never going to just leave someone behind or anything like that. So, but yeah, I think the doctor in general is a bit of a megalomaniac, because if that's going too far, he's incredibly egotistical. We can say that. He's very much, he has a superiority complex, especially amongst creatures of Earth, and you realize that he's just sort of desperate to be the alpha.
Right.
Even when there's 3 of him, even against himself, he's desperate to be the alpha.
Yeah.
So I think that's fascinating. And we get some very tragic deaths in this episode. One tragic death in this episode, but we also get a wonderful.
Or do we?
That's the thing. Yeah. We're never quite sure about that. So.
If you're referring to Omega, he does turn up later.
No, I'm not referring to Omega. I'm referring to Bessie.
Oh, well, this is just one of several Bessies. So.
Right, but we lose a Bessie on on our way back to our home planet here. So yeah, it's always, poor old Bessie. It's always sad to see her go.
It is. Yeah, this is, for me, I mean, I love the fact that the doctors are interacting. This is the first multi-doctor story, one of the things I want to talk about during our trivia section. Yeah, just, this is the one that kind of set the trend for all those multi-doctor stories later on. And it established, I think, that, like you said, the doctor doesn't really get along with himself or herself. The doctors, for whatever reason, I think it's probably true of all of us. If we were actually paired with ourselves, we would probably really get on our own nerves, I'm guessing. Because just, the fact that, sometimes you don't get along with people because you're too alike, perhaps. And I think, obviously if you're the same person, only with the doctor's case in a different incarnation, that would probably be, even more so, I'm guessing.
I feel like you'd probably be in competition with yourself for other people's attention.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be difficult. You'd have to see, like, hey, what is, Xan version 2.1 have over Xan version 2.2? I don't get it. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and the doctors always seem like, they are always trying to outdo one another, which always makes for fun, as a viewer, especially if you're a hardcore Whovian, that, you're watching these and, the doctors bickering with one another. It's always fun when they always try to outdo one another or try to be, appear to be more clever than the other. And it brings some great comedy to the show, I think.
Agreed.
All right. So a guest cast this time, of course, we get the late great Patrick Troughton, returning as the second Doctor for the first time, but thankfully won't be his last. And we get William Hartnell, which is sadly his last appearance, but at least he appeared one more time before his passing as the first Doctor. Nicholas Courtney, of course, as the Brigadier. John Levine as Sergeant Benton. Stephen Thorne makes the introduction for Omega, so he's essentially the first Omega, and he's notable because he played the character Azal, the big giant cloved hoof demon that turns up in the Daemons from the Jon Pertwee era. He also turns up as a first Ogron in Frontier in Space, another Jon Pertwee story. And he played another big bad, Eldrad, from The Hand of Fear, which, like I said, was the last story featuring Sarah Jane. And then he reprised that character of Eldrad for Big Finish audio, featuring the fifth Doctor, Peter Davison, which is called Eldrad Must Die, which is a great one. I highly recommend checking that out if you haven't listened to it. We had Rex Robinson as Dr. Tyler, who later plays Gebek in The Monster of Peladon, another Jon Pertwee story. And interestingly enough, he played Dr. Carter in The Hand of Fear. So The Hand of Fear getting a lot of play from both the writers and a couple of actors in this story. And notably enough for you Superman fans, I thought I'd mention that Rex Robinson also played a subway engineer in Superman 4, The Quest for Peace.
Do Superman fans really know that movie, though, Charles?
No, they don't, but if you're a hardcore Superman fan, you might.
I know, I'm just joking.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Superman 4, granted, it's not the greatest Superman film ever made. At least it's better than Superman 3, in my opinion, but that's not hard. That's a very low bar to
It's a
overtake.
low bar.
Yeah. At least Superman 4 had Lex Luthor in it. Let's just put it that way.
Yes, it does have that.
Yeah. Laurie Webb plays Arthur Ollis, Mr. Ollis. And Clyde Pollitt I wanted to mention because he plays the Chancellor, one of the head Time Lords that are introduced in the story. But he actually appeared as a Time Lord in the War Games. So, presuming it's the exact same Time Lord, one of the three Time Lords that was responsible for forcing the Second Doctor to regenerate into the Third Doctor, Jon Pertwee, in that story. And now here he is in charge of the whole deal. Trivia. So the script was originally supposed to feature all three Doctors equally, but of course, William Hartnell was too ill to be able to play the full role as envisioned. And sadly, Hartnell died 2 years later after the story, in 1975 at the age of 67. So it's kind of disturbing that William Hartnell died 16 years after my current age. So hooray for that, right? Another reminder of mortality that seems to be permeating the conversation tonight, I guess, at least before we started. The production team also planned for Fraser Hines to reprise the role of Jamie McCrimmon alongside the Second Doctor, and interestingly, also have a romance with Jo.
Oh.
However, Fraser Hines was not available due to his work on the soap opera at the time, Emmerdale Farm. And much of the role that it was originally intended for Jamie was reassigned to Sergeant Benton. So I'm sure John Levine was happy that he got a few extra lines in this story.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking the same thing. Like, okay, well, at least for one positive scene, I got more scenes. I got more lines out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of like next man available, and that, in this case, it was Sergeant Benton, right? To try to salvage the idea of Jamie appearing, though, the production team even tried to write a cameo for him in the last scene, calling the Second Doctor back to his own timeline, but even that was scrubbed because of Fraser Hines' Emmerdale commitments. At least they tried to get him, but didn't work out, sadly. And then he only turns up in a really quick cameo later on in the Five Doctors. So it's a little disappointing, but at least he got to be in the Two Doctors with Patrick Troughton in the Colin Baker era. Interestingly enough, also, Wendy Padbury's character, Zoe Harriet, Jamie's fellow companion for the Second Doctor, was also considered to return, but Jon Pertwee felt that, there were too many returning characters and that would be distracting. So, thanks for depriving us of Zoe, Pertwee.
Megalomaniac.
Like you said, right?
Told you.
Yep. And like I said, this is the first multi-Doctor story, which was later followed for the 20th anniversary, the Five Doctors. And then again in the Colin Baker era, the Two Doctors. Then later, all the way in the modern era with the Day of the Doctor, the 50th anniversary special. And then Peter Capaldi's final story, Twice Upon a Time. So, if you're ever in the mood to do a marathon, that's a good one. And lastly, Omega was originally named OHM, because if you take OHM and you read it upside down, it looks like WHO, right? Mm-hmm. And that reflects apparently the writer's desire for him to be seen as the Doctor's opposite number. So that's kind of, I think, why he's called Omega. They probably decided, well, is not a great name. So what about Omega? And I'm guessing that's how that worked out. So that's all the trivia I have, unless Holly or anybody else has any trivia they'd like to share.
according to the website, the TARDIS fan base,
Mm-hmm.
this was the official time someone said it's bigger on the inside.
Oh,
Now, I cannot confirm nor deny that. I'm just saying, because, heaven knows the internet's never wrong.
never.
But yes, but that is what the website, the three doctors at TARDIS.fandom.com.
Okay.
That's it said.
All right. Any other trivia you'd like to share?
Nope.
Okay. All right. That was easy. So we have 3 topics today, appropriate enough for the 3 doctors, right? So topic number 1, let's talk Doctors 3, which is the title that I think would make a really great Star Trek story, written by yours truly. But maybe I have a little self-interest in that one.
Yes.
So let's talk the first, second, and third Doctors. As the third Doctor, faced with this very dangerous threat that the Time Lords bring in the second Doctor out of his own timeline, essentially breaking one of their own Time Lord laws, whatever those are. And that's not enough, so because those 2 Doctors start bickering with one another, so the Time Lords just say, oh, well, let's try and bring in the first Doctor as well, but he gets trapped in a time eddy, as we're told, and can only appear in an advisory role. So I want to get everybody's thoughts. And Jesse, I'll start with you first. What did you make of our 3 Doctors, or at least as Xan so eloquently phrased it, 2 Doctors and a Zoom call?
So I like the idea. After watching the 50th anniversary, the consistency of Doctors not liking they don't play well together.
Right.
And I think we've already talked a little bit about that, but I think it is a little bit to do, I think we all touched on it, that, there, sometimes, if you have too much similar personalities, it's tough to get along. Both of them being used to being the smartest and alpha in the room, and all of a sudden now then you have against that. Also kind of, is your older self not necessarily wiser, like you're going, I'm the most modern, I know what's going on, the back and forth. I especially love and I did not catch this, and now I'm going to enjoy every time a doctor says, oh, you've redesigned the TARDIS. I don't like it.
This is the first time for that, yes.
And I just was like, I'm pointing to the TV, like, oh, look, they do that a lot. They do that a lot. I was just so
He said
smiled.
the thing.
He said the thing. He said the thing. And, and as I already talked about, I love, in fact, that's one of my quotes, Benton, like, yeah, okay, it's bigger the inside, like, whoop-de-doo.
You're right.
Right?
It's kind of obvious, right? Yeah.
Yeah. That was just a lot of fun. So I love how they kind of bicker, but when they needed to get together, they could. And then, at the end, while they certainly weren't friends, it was good meeting me. It was good meeting me. And it just, you see, I admire when you go, we're building a foundation that we can build upon. And this was in a lot of ways, right? Whether you're watching the 5 Doctors or the 50th anniversary or even Time Bridge, where Davison and Tennant meet. There's a lot of things. Yeah, Time Crash, where we've set this up, what the sketch of what it should be, kind of an outline of what we're going to do. And it's just really fun to see. So I enjoyed everything about the Doctors. I understand it was very sad William Hartnell wasn't well enough to perform. But I think, as you said, right, at least he filmed in, he interacted, he wanted to be part of this anniversary special because, he loved being the Doctor.
Right. And, he got a lot of adulation from playing the Doctor that he had never received before. Especially if you watched the great TV movie, the Adventure in Space and Time, which features is essentially a biographical film about William Hartnell and the creation of Doctor Who. That you saw how much it really changed William Hartnell, and I think made him a better person as a result.
I agree with that, and I truly adore that movie. It is such a love letter to the early origins of the series,
Mm-hmm.
and it spotlights in a lot of ways, people who are, I hate to use the word misfits, but people that were a little different put together this series that has now lasted post 50 years. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is. All right. Holly, what about you? What was your thoughts about our 3 Doctors in this story?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, sometimes the first Doctor was kind of channeling the War Doctor a little bit with 2 and 3
Yeah.
kind of bickering. And I loved the Briggs reaction when he steps into the TARDIS and he's ticked. He's like, this is what you've been spending all the unit money on? Not scientific experiments?
Yeah, this is like the first time the Brigadier gets to go in the TARDIS, and also Benton. So,
yes.
so I thought that was kind of a cool moment.
And I loved how Troughton and Pertwee played off each other, and Troughton kind of second Doctor pouting when the Briggs like, I've explained it to everybody. You're his assistant. What do you mean I'm his assistant? It's like, Doctor, I'll be okay. Just
calm down. Yeah, exactly. Just roll with it. And he's still not happy about it. He still fumes about it.
Yeah.
But so as a new Who fan, someone who's watched the Day of the Doctor, you kind of appreciated, since you got to see how the War Doctor, the 10th Doctor, and 11th Doctor got along. Do you see a lot of echoes?
Yes.
In that story, in this story.
Yeah, I saw echoes. Well, and later even Omega makes the comment. It's just like, that's the two.
Are you sure you're like the same intelligence or something like that?
Yeah. Are you sure? Yeah. Are you sure that you and he are the same intelligence? I'm just like, yeah. I mean, because the War Doctor even is just like, they're me.
Yeah, Omega's throwing some shade on the second Doctor, so. Yeah. All right. Anything else about these Doctors that you really enjoyed talking or enjoyed watching?
Just them trying to finally putting aside whatever differences they had with each other to work together.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, it's always fun to watch, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, and Xan, how about you?
Like I said before, I really like how seeing all 3 of them put together really shows you that the Doctor is kind of an egotistical megalomaniac with a superiority complex. And I know that sounds bad when I say it, but you're
really putting a good light on him. I'm just saying.
I mean it in the nicest possible, most endearing way that I can when I'm using.
He's a lovely megalomaniac.
He's a lovely man, but he really does think he's above everybody else.
Right.
Which we know because we know what's going to happen. I mean, we know how he gets in trouble for his ways and thinking that he's above all the laws of the Time Lords. So we know that he's a little bit into himself. So I really liked that, and I loved how bringing all 3 of the Doctors together shows you how subtle the differences can be in the performers, but how different the Doctor can be and how unique each actor can make the Doctor. And I really love that because that's something about Doctor Who that is very necessary for the audience to get on board with for the show to be successful. The idea of regeneration, and it not only regenerates you physically, but it regenerates your personality a little bit. You still have your core person, and you still have most of your memories don't get scrambled in your regeneration process. But every regeneration brings a new thing to the personality, and
it makes them more individuals.
Makes them definitely more individuals, even though they are an individual version of the same being.
Right.
And having the three doctors together really shows you that, about how there are times when they can be similar, times they can be very different. And then you have things where we do get an oh my giddy aunt in this, and so you're like, yes,
he said the thing. Yes,
he said the thing. You're reminded of each actor's idiosyncrasies with the character, and as sad as it is that William Hartnell was so ill and could not be on screen,
right?
There's something about the fact that he is the advisor from afar that leads you to believe that he's the first and therefore maybe the wisest and the one that is the advisor, that he still, even if he can't get there, he still has to be there. He's the one that brings the two of them together. He's the one that says, knock it off, stop fighting, we have to work on this together. And even though he starts out just like the others, he's like, oh, you're my replacements, a dandy and a clown.
Right.
So he figured out he's sort of the
father of the group.
Yeah, because he's sort of doing it from afar.
Right. He's the first.
Right. He's the first. And it kind of gives this inadvertent reverence to the concept that Hartnell, no matter what we do, no matter who your favorite doctor is, and no matter who does a fabulous performance going forward, Hartnell's the alpha, and he always will be.
Yeah.
Because he's the first one. And the one thing I really didn't like about how this episode was made, I felt like we should have seen Hartnell on the screen, but just the screen. The fact that they filmed the TV itself with everyone's reflection in it, I think made him look a little weaker than he needed to be, because he seemed, first of all, it was so dark where he was, and then second of all, to have studio lighting and other actor reflections over him made him seem a lot farther away.
Yeah.
So I would have preferred that from a technical standpoint, but again, like I said, no matter what.
You think that might have been deliberate, though, because they wanted to show how distanced he was from the others?
Maybe, but I feel like it just looked like a YouTube video where somebody films their television.
Right.
So it lost a little bit, but at the same time, Hartnell is such a good performer, and being the one who created the Doctor, it still comes through. The strength of his character still comes through.
Right.
So as much as I thought that was a bad tactical decision, I think it didn't detract. It just would have been my preference.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in and say I agree. I had not thought of that, but it would have been nice at least a couple of times where you could have cut to just him, and you know that you're seeing him on the screen, but to give him a little clearer vision and a little better screen time versus just the copy of, as you said, we're watching YouTube and someone's filming an episode like, oh look, and they're going to post on YouTube. So I think that's really a good point.
Well, if they were to, I kind of get, because when he's on the monitor screen in the TARDIS, it's going to look a little different. But I thought they should have interspersed that with some direct camera cuts.
Exactly.
Where essentially it's it's just the Doctor talking to the audience.
Yeah.
Right.
Where you see them look at him, where they hear him say, "Oh, hey, chaps," and they turn around and they say, "Oh, well, it's me again," and then you would cut to just a talking head of William Hartnell without the background, the visual background noise of having them filming that monitor.
Right. I mean, obviously, we don't know what happened with the production or why they felt they needed to do this, but it is interesting why they didn't, like I said, intersperse those with some direct shots, like you were talking about, Xan. Yeah,
like I said, I don't think it detracted to the point where I was distracted from it. At first I sort of thought, oh, this would have been nicer if they did it this way, and then I just kind of moved on. So.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of us, armchair quarterbacking this thing like 50 years later. So
yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I mean, I love the interaction between these characters. I love one of the things I really loved, and you kind of touched upon this a little bit, was the deference that the second Doctor has for the first Doctor. You know, he makes this comment,
Right.
very interesting comment. You know, I think it was to Benton or the Brigadier. I can't remember which, but you know, he says that you know, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something along the lines of, you know, like, I've always respected his opinions. You know,
Right. And that reminded me a lot of Tennant and Davison, where he says, I just have to say, I loved being you.
hmm
You know, it reminded me a lot of that.
yeah. But I mean, but I just love the deference because it's like, hey,
Oh,
Hartnell
yeah.
was the originator. He's
Going to be the alpha no matter what anybody does. He's the first.
Exactly, because you wouldn't have a show without him. Let's face it.
Heck no, you would not.
So it's kind of nice. I thought it was nice that at least they acknowledged that a little bit. You know, even
Right.
if even in kind of a throwaway line, but it stood out to me at least, and I really appreciated it.
It
I
did to
agree.
me too. That you know, he does. You know, he does have respect for his original self, and he also does know. You know, I should probably listen to him. He is me.
Right. But yeah, I love their chemistry. I love their interactions with one another. You know, this is the first time that, you know, with the second Doctor and the third Doctor, that you kind of establish the fact that they don't get along with each other, and it's something that kind of carries through to, like I said, these later multi-Doctor stories where the Doctors don't get along with each other, but underlying, there's this, you know, appreciation. They just like to kind of torment each other, almost like brothers. And
Right.
Jesse
There
could
are
probably
children
relate
who
to that.
all of a sudden have siblings,
Yeah.
where they all of a sudden have these siblings, and just like siblings, they can badmouth each other all they want. But if somebody tries to chime in and say, "Oh yeah, that guy's an idiot," oh, watch your back, because
Right.
Exactly.
do not talk bad about my alter self.
In this weird way, they're almost like family.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just really love that. I find that very charming, and I love the fact that Patrick Troughton and Jon Pertwee actually carry that over in real life. Because whenever they would appear at conventions together, they would, you know, like to tease each other, like, you know, kind of one up each other a little bit, and that was something that, you know, they would play up to for the fans, and I just kind of like that carried over. But yeah, and then Hartnell being the mediator of the two, it just I thought it brought a nice little balance in a lot of ways. You know, you've got, you know, the second and the third Doctor clashing with the first Doctor, kind of like, you know, essentially calling out you know, his successors and saying, look, you know, do what you need to do. You got to do this, and just, you know, stop bickering with one another and do your damn jobs. And I really like that.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else about our three Doctors in this story? Anybody wants to share? All right. Topic number 2, the three companions. Although, yes, I will admit, yes, the Brigadier and Sergeant Benton are technically companions. They never travel with the Doctor. But for the sake of the topic, I'm lumping those two in with Joe Grant. So, Holly, I'll start with you first on this one. What did you make of Joe and and essentially also the Brigadier and Sergeant Benton trying to cope with the fact that they have more than one Doctor to deal with now, and you know, just all this other stuff going on when they all get transported to the antimatter universe? What did you make of all that?
I think they did pretty darn well. I mean, though I think the Brig at a couple of times is about ready to just like, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
You two hands out of this. And Benton, I mean, he did really good too, and it didn't faze him. Oh, there's two of you? Okay. You know, hey, Doctor Two, I'm not a sergeant anymore. I got promoted. And then the Briggs is like, you know, kind of pulling aside the second Doctor's like, were you the one with all that Yeti business? And it's like, well, Moving on.
And,
Next up.
and then the Brigadier starts telling the second Doctor about his own future. He's like, "Oh, that's interesting."
Yeah.
Uh,
To paraphrase a certain future wife, spoilers, sweetie.
Yeah, kind of. You notice that wasn't really addressed. He was like, he's learning about his
No.
own future, but presumably he's going to forget it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what did you make of Joe in this story?
Joel,
Yeah,
I
because one of the things I thought was interesting was that she has this pretty strong devotion to the Doctor, and it really comes out that she just does not want to leave his side.
no, and it doesn't. And she wasn't. Her devotion went to both incarnations, 2 and 3, and then I can't remember if she saw 1 or not.
On the view screen, she did, yeah.
Okay, but she was just like, "Hey, that's the Doctor." After it got explained to her, she wasn't playing favorites. She was just like, "Nope, She wasn't.
She was cool with it.
She was cool with it, which was nice to see. She was in for it for the however long it took, and she's when going out with the third Doctor and getting sucked into that antimatter, whatever little bubble.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to share?
Nope. I think that covers it.
Okay. Very, very succinct. So, Xan, how about you? What did you make of Joe and the Brig and Sergeant Benton in the story?
Yeah, like Holly said, I think it's so neat that Joe is just loyal to the Doctor, regardless of who that is.
Right.
She's loyal to the Doctor, whether he's a face on the TV, whether he's a dandy, or whether he's a clown. She's loyal to the Doctor, and I do think that causes Joe some problems in the way she's like, "No, I'm not leaving the Doctor," and he's like, "I'm like doing this trick so you can get the heck out of here. Please, just listen to me." But
you're talking about when the third Doctor races out of the TARDIS, and Joe's like, "I'm not going to leave you," and then they both get zapped,
and then she gets sucked into the
antimatter universe. Yeah,
antimatter, quarry that they go into.
the antimatter quarry, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that's Joe's character, though. Joe is very
loyal.
Right. Joe is very loyal, and like when she was hired by the Brigadier to work with the Doctor, he said, "But she's not a scientist." And the Brigadier said, "Well, Liz told me that pretty much all you need is someone to agree with you all the time."
And hand you test tubes.
Test tubes.
Yeah.
So, which was kind of adorable when the Brigadier said, "Is there anything we can do for you?" He's like, "Yeah, hand me that test tube."
For that silicon rod.
The silicon rod, and then he stirs his coffee with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
His coffee with it. So, but that's Joe. Joe is there to support the Doctor in whatever way she needs to. So I find Joe is she's very endearing in that sense, but I do think she puts herself in peril more than she needs to because she's just doesn't want to leave the Doctor behind. So she's a mixture of a little sister and a big sister, where she wants to protect the Doctor, but she's also tagging along even when she probably shouldn't.
Yes.
So I always thought that was very endearing about Joe's character.
So you think her loyalty and her protectiveness gets the better of her in a lot of ways?
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes I think she does maybe put herself in peril when she doesn't need to. But again, that helps advance the story sometimes. So I completely understand why her character is written that way. But I did kind of like the sort of flirty crush Benton seemed to have on her in this episode.
Right.
I thought that was kind of adorable and something. I'm like, I know Joe marries another guy, but that would have been kind of cute if the two of them had sort of
they had history together, right?
Yeah, yeah, they had some history, but if they'd sort of getting thrown together with work, they maybe I don't know, but not to.
Oh, you mean those work romances never work out?
Those workplace romances those are doomed from the start.
Pretty much.
So Benton was adorable though, because when he sees Patrick Troughton, he's like, "Oh my gosh, it's my old friend, the Doctor!"
Right.
He's just excited to see his old friend again, and they just went right into reminiscing about old times. And because Patrick Dr. Troughton incarnation of the Doctor, it's not terribly jarring for him to understand that that's the Doctor because he's been through regeneration. He's seen 2 different Doctors. So, well, I saw this new one show up. How weird is it that you would come back? I don't know. You guys do your weird Doctor thing, whatever. So
Yeah, he's
Benton's
more accepting of it than the Brigadier is.
Benton's very accepting of everything about the Doctor, especially like we already talked about, where he goes into the TARDIS and the Doctor says, "Aren't you going to say it, Benton, that it's bigger on the inside?" And he's like, "Yeah, I pretty much thought that was obvious."
Right.
Yeah.
There's no way to. Why say it out loud? Because everybody sees it.
Yeah.
And
Foregone conclusion.
It's probably one
Right.
of the better reactions, I think, to that question,
Yes.
right?
Like everybody walks in and sort of accepts it, and he's like, "Yeah,
Duh.
I say this when I was in college, and I'd be in class with someone that I felt would sort of interrupt the class to ask for clarification of something that was understood by the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if somebody is using a term with you and not defining it, the assumption is that you know the term also. So if everybody walks into the TARDIS and makes no comment about the fact that it's bigger on the inside, that's just an accepted fact that you're just going to have to accept as well. Making comments about it is just irrelevant and extraneous. And as for the Brigadier, I don't know. The Brigadier is sort of the perfect military man because he's very interested in regimentation and protocol and following things by the book. And I love him when he's like, oh, this is just a beach. We're probably miles from London. Like, yeah, no, we are way farther than miles from London. Where he just sort of can't wrap his head around the fact that there's something that unit can't figure out or that unit can't fix.
I love that double take that he does when he opens up the door and he's like, "What?"
And it's just like it's like it's like Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
Where they try to leave the house and it's weird sandworms. You know that scene in Beetlejuice?
Yes,
yeah. It reminded me of that a lot where, is the Brigadier dead and trying to leave his house, but he can't escape the sandworm? So the Brigadier just seems to have a really hard time accepting that the Doctor knows what he's talking about. And he has a hard time accepting the Doctor's explanations, even when it's right there in front of him. And I just sometimes wonder, how long is the Brigadier going to have to work with the Doctor before he realizes that when he's doing something with the Doctor, something crazy that he can't understand and that unit can't explain or fix is going to happen?
He gets better.
Does get better. But even at the end of this episode where he says, okay, well, we're back at unit headquarters. We should probably take a full inventory and make sure nothing's missing. And Benton says, missing? Where are we going to say that it went?
Yeah. Which is a great line, I thought.
Yeah, where are we going to say that it went? And the Brigadier's like,
Benton!
So the Brigadier just cracks me up in this because he's been with the Doctor for long enough that he should be about as accepting as Benton is, but he has a really hard time.
He just has a more rigid military mind, I think, than Benton does.
His entire life has been point A to point B will eventually lead you to point C. Whereas with the Doctor, sometimes you start at point C and then go to point A, and then sometimes you go to point Q and miss all of the steps in between. And it just seems like the Brigadier, all the empirical evidence that he's presented with, can't get his head wrapped around that. And I think the Brigadier is the perfect example of a straight man when it comes to science fiction. That there's always that guy that, but that's not how things are. It's like, well, obviously they are. Open the door. Look around you. Surrounded by Christmas tree ornament monsters. I don't know what you think UNIT is going to do about this.
And Nicholas Courtney does that so well. He's a great straight man.
And he's got that voice that's blustering without being like,
yeah.
He doesn't go over the top, and he's perfect with it. He's absolutely perfect. And I can't think of his name, but Benton is perfect at it too, with being sort of
John Levine, yeah.
Yes, John Levine, thank you. He's perfect at being the sort of, wide-eyed, like, this is why I joined the military, to see new things.
Right. It's kind of what we do.
Have
We investigate the odd in the strange.
Yeah.
your unit. You should be used to this by now. This is not just, unit is essentially Torchwood before there's a Torchwood. So
Yeah. And,
they should be
and
used to this. The Brigadier, I think the Brigadier just goes home and like sits in a chair in his boxer shorts and his undershirt with like a beer and stares at a blank television because he's just trying to wrap his head around his head.
Oh, that's sad.
And Benton's kind of like the young, excited puppy dog. Oh, the doctor's here. We're going to go have fun and go on an adventure. Well, Briggs, the older, wiser senior dog, like, oh, crud. This again.
It's like, damn it, there's a puppy here. I don't want to deal with puppies right now.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I just want to lay down and relax. And sleep.
Go do your thing, and I'll just stay here. It's nap time, because that's what we do. We're dogs. We nap, and so yeah, it just cracks me up how this all 4 parts of this story, the Brigadier is like, well, I can't believe what you're saying. It's like, dude, what more do you need?
Right.
Right.
Well, like I said, he does get better, so at least you can teach the old dog some new tricks, right?
Yeah, he does get better. He does start figuring it out, but you would think after having, after reading enough of Liz's reports, he would have been better already. He would have been better by now. But
Right.
it takes him.
He should have been better.
While.
Yeah. He
should have.
He gets there. He's just a little slower than, I guess, Sergeant Benton, perhaps. All right, Jesse. How about you? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, a couple of things. One, to be fair, the Brigadier has not gone out to space yet because the Doctor, right, has been, unless he did this with the second Doctor, right, on most of his things have been earthbound.
Yeah, right.
So that's the only thing. But yes, he is very much, I agree with all 3 of you, he has a very rigid military mind. In fact, when we see, what was the episode where he had been retired and he was working at a boys' school.
Modern Undead from the period era. Yeah.
Yeah, we saw the 2 different, versions of him. One where things had gone poorly and his house looked totally unorganized. I'm like, that's not that's not the general. And then we later, kind of explained a little bit of that. How much I love Jamie. And so I was very disappointed we didn't. In fact, before I knew that they wanted, my first thought was, man, why didn't we get a Jamie appearance? But
now you know, because
trivia. It was nice to see Benton get these parts and this role, because he did really well with it. And I think you are exactly right that he's just kind of a little more, I'm going with the flow. If you're involved with the Doctor, who knows what the heck is going to happen, and you've just got to be, you got to carry a sandwich the way that we in the future companions talked about, and you got to be ready to roll with the punches. I do, and you guys already mentioned, but the idea of the Brigadier going, okay, we got to get things back to normal. We're back home. We have to do an inventory. And he's like, why? What are we going to tell where it went? I mean, how are we going to talk about this? Was really, really neat. Every time I see Jo, I think of her appearances on the Sarah Jane Adventures. And so I see...
In the Death of the Doctor, yeah.
Yeah, that it was... I see the... and, I wonder if what did they want in a companion at this time? And, you guys talked about just to hand test tubes and tell the Doctor he's brilliant. So it was cool to see her and Sarah Jane doing more than that and showing that she did have this experience that we could do. There was no excess characters in this story. There was no, I think, excess storylines. It's 4 chapters, but it moved quickly, and everyone had, I think, a fairly significant role in it. So just a really good model. So it was great to see the 3 companions. I understand why technically, the Whovian fanboys are going to go, they're not companions, but I know exactly what you're saying, Charles.
Right.
They are in this
Technically.
role.
But
yes.
Yeah, but essentially that's what they do
role.
here.
Exactly. So great stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of Joe moments that I really liked. I liked Joe when they're kind of in the cell together, on the the planet Omega, and the doctors are like talking about the Omega's will and whatnot, and Joe is the only one who brings up, well, hey, you're a Time Lord like Omega. In fact, you're like, both of you are the same Time Lord. Surely, your will is powerful enough as his, right? Or at least not powerful enough to get think up a door and get us out of here. And so I kind of like the fact that Joe is featured more as the out of the box thinker, that thinking of things that even the doctors didn't, even the doctors didn't think of. And they kind of the
well
two doctors kind of look at each other and like, hey, you're right. Why don't we do that? And they took her suggestion and ran with it, and it worked. So I like that. I like that, and I also like the fact that at the end of the story, when the third doctor's kind of like, he's a little depressed over essentially sending Omega to be killed, to his demise, and Joe kind of picks up on the doctor's remorse a little bit, and she's like, well, you don't have to feel guilty. You didn't have any other choice, especially when Omega, essentially put the entire universe at stake. And
it was him or everything.
Right. So I kind of like that she was trying to reassure the doctor, and she kind of, she's empathetic enough to pick up on the fact that, even her, I mean, for lack of a better word, her role model, her idol here, needs some words of comfort. And I like the fact that Joe is there to provide that for him. So
right. She's pretty into, like I said, she is a little bit maternal with him as well, but also a little bit of a little sister tagging along. So I think she's a very complex character, definitely more than I gave her credit for her first episode.
Yeah, I think she's underestimated as a companion.
I think she definitely is. Yeah, she absolutely definitely is.
I think a lot of people, especially a lot of Whovians, they kind of dismiss her as like, oh, she's the kooky one in the go-go boots. But
right, and she felt like, even to the doctor, she felt like a downgrade from Liz.
Right, kind of more of a
she felt like that to. Yeah, she felt like that to me too, because I love Liz.
Oh, I love Liz too.
But
I was so disappointed when she left.
After watching, what'd you say?
I said I was so disappointed when she left.
Right, so disappointed. And then, after watching the show, you sort of get, there's more here to her than just handing somebody test tubes and stroking his ego.
Right.
She has much more to offer. And, I think that's definitely a testament to her character, that she's given this assistant job to this egotistical alien, but then she really makes a lot out of what she's able to do, because she is very intuitive when it comes to him.
Yeah, and they're just, essentially, the third Doctor and Joe is one of the great, I think, Doctor companion pairings throughout
Agreed.
Doctor Who's history. It's very much iconic. Just like the fourth Doctor and Sarah Jane, or the second Doctor and Jamie,
10th Doctor and Rose,
7th Doctor and Ace. So yeah,
7th Doctor Ace, yeah.
So I really like it, and I like the relationship they have, because obviously when the third Doctor and Joe first were met at one another in Terror of the Autons, there was especially with the Doctor, there's a lot more friction there, but over time, through the episodes, he's come to rely on her and sees her potential, and they form a really great friendship with one another, and I really like that.
Great. And when she leaves to get married,
He's really
he's
upset.
like, he's really upset. And you can tell, not because he's going to have to get his own test tubes, but because he's going to miss her.
Yes.
He's going to
Damn
miss
it,
her
now I
as a
gotta get my
person.
own test tubes. Come on.
Do I have to make my own phone calls too? What the hell is this?
Where's my coffee? Come on.
Yeah. Where'd the tea lady go? What happened to her?
Oh, it's just a
It's
master
like
in
the
disguise.
Joker
Don't worry.
when his clothes are dirty. Where's Harley?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite episodes. I love that. So in the Brigadier and Sergeant Benton, they're always this great, sometimes comic relief duo, and they just get along. I think that the Brigadier, we talked about how inflexible he is, but when you're doing some comedy, sometimes you need that straight man, and the Brigadier more than provides that. And Nicholas Courtney, he's such a Doctor Who legend, and I love watching him. Even if he is inflexible and a lot of times and a little rigid, but it makes a good counterbalance, I think, with the Doctor and some of the other characters, that to have that rigid, inflexible character that is still on your side, but he just doesn't quite get it like the other characters might. So I thought it was a lot of fun. All right. Anything else about Joe, the Brigadier, or Sergeant Benton? Anybody wants to mention? Okay. Third and final topic. Let's talk The Power of Three. No, not the Matt Smith era story. So let's talk Omega and the Time Lords, who decide, well, hey, let's use up all of our remaining power in Gallifrey to bring Doctors 2 and 1 into the third Doctor's timeline and essentially try to help him out in this very major crisis. So Xan, I'll start with you first on this one. What did you make of our big bad Omega, since this was his first story, and what did you make of the Time Lords, this is only their second appearance on Doctor Who after the War Games?
Right. And here's the thing, is that I have some conflicting feelings about the Time Lords.
Okay.
Everything we've seen with the Time Lords so far, with where they banish Patrick Troughton's Doctor, and even what we know as people who are watching this 60 years later, because we know about Trial of the Time Lords, and we know that the Master is a thing.
Yeah, or the Ronnie.
And the Ronnie. They're not an altruistic race. The Time Lords, having mastered time travel, I think is where their ego comes from. Is the fact that they have mastered time travel and they're able to go anywhere, anytime, whenever. So I think they feel really invincible. And what Omega tells them, makes them realize, is that they're not necessarily great people because of, what happened to Omega. And, they get what they need from him. And then when he's gone, it's just like, oh yeah, so sad. Let's build a statue to him. And then we're going to travel through time for the next 1,000 years. So you really kind of understand that they're not the greatest race of people.
Right.
Which I think is I think it's a necessary thing to understand for the core concept of Doctor Who, as to why the Doctor is so rebellious against them.
And why he left Gallifrey in the first place.
Why he left Gallifrey, why he's willing to risk things like his ability to time travel just to sort of be away from that. I'm thinking about the reason, and that's, spoiler alert, at the end of this episode, he gets his TARDIS back, and he gets his memories back, and he gets his ability to use the TARDIS back.
His exile is over.
But his exile is over, because when, he became, part of his punishment was not just exile, but was to become Jon Pertwee. So the Time Lords really did sentence the Doctor to a lot of trauma, being marooned changing his appearance, having to use up one of his regeneration.
Yeah, they took one of his lives. Yeah.
Yeah, that is an unnecessary regeneration right there, because that's a punishment. That's not, oh, I'm injured or my life force is failing. None of that kind of stuff. That was a premature regeneration. So even he is, oh, the Time Lords have forgiven me. At the end of this, the Time Lords have forgiven me. I have all my memories back. And then Joe says, I guess you'll be off then. He's like, no, I've got stuff to do here. He still doesn't want to go back to Gallifrey. He doesn't want to be on the Council of Time Lords. He does, he's a rebel, and knowing that the Time Lords aren't great people makes that make more sense. And Omega is a perfect example of how the Time Lords got to be the way they were, because we see Omega as the alpha Time Lord. He's the one that created the ability to travel through time. He's the one who mastered it.
Yeah, the solar engineer.
Right, he's a solar engineer, and because that's the thing about time travel, and that's one of the cool things about this episode, is that it explains how this race of people is able to do time travel, because we've been talking about the concept of time travel since H.G. Wells and before.
Right.
But the thing is, it's impossible because it requires so much energy, more energy than is available on this planet. But this episode explains, well, if you harness a sun, you can do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that they take the time in this episode to explain how the Time Lords are able to do what they do, because that's the hard thing when it comes to time travel stories for people who have a difficult time with suspension of disbelief and a rudimentary understanding of science.
Yeah.
Because time travel is just impossible because it requires more energy than we can generate on this planet. And
and a star is essentially a nuclear reactor, for those who don't really get that.
Exactly. So they don't go into too much scientific detail on this, but they give you enough to go, yeah, okay, I'd buy that. So, but even Omega, when he says, I was left here and forgotten, and the doctor says, no, you weren't forgotten. My entire life I've seen you as a hero. He says, hero, I should be a god.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite quotes on that one.
And that's a Time Lord thing. That megalomaniacal attitude is a Time Lord thing. Think about Omega, think about the Rani, think about the Master, and think about the Doctor. And think about all of the guys in the council. As much as they can't stand the Doctor, they know that more Time Lords is the only thing that's going to fix this problem. So I really liked the backstory of the complexity of the Time Lords as a race of people, right? Or actually Gallifreyans transfer into being Time Lords once they did master the time travel, because before that they were just dudes from Gallifrey, and now they're Time Lords because they have this technology. And I liked that we got that backstory. I liked that we saw how they can turn on their own for their own benefit. And I like that we saw what can happen to you when, Omega pretty much Count of Monte Cristo's himself into oblivion. Just his eons length plan for revenge by using sheer force of will to make everything exist around him. Right. He died probably about 1,000 years ago from natural causes, but he's just been willing himself to stay alive. So even though there's nothing beneath that Darth Vader outfit, that sort of, Darth Vader,
the mask,
this helmet he's got going on there, there's nothing behind the mask. He's willing himself into existence because out of spite and revenge, which, as we know from reading things like the Count of Monte Cristo, that's not going to end well.
No.
And you really get the idea that the Doctor felt for him, I think we all felt for him, that he felt this sense of betrayal. He was, he was sort of the con of this, just sort of,
he got screwed over by the Time Lords and abandoned.
Yeah.
Forgotten about.
Marooned on the planet, buried alive. That's
buried
very
alive.
much buried alive. So you can tell that the Doctor really feels for them, and both doctors, I think, genuinely want to help him. I mean, he is a fellow Time Lord. He is their hero. To do another Star Trek reference, he's sort of the Zephram Cochrane of this whole thing.
Right.
And, they probably grew up, like I said, with statues, with learning about him in school. Everybody talking about probably ballads. Everybody talking about what a hero he was. And now here he is, and he's stuck. And when they take the mask off, they're like, dude, we want to help you, but we can't. There is nothing under there. You are gone. And the only freedom they can give him is to release him from his own cycle of will, frankly. And it's very tragic. But again, like Joe says, it was either him or everything, because it's not just a him or us. It's not just a him or us thing. It's not just him or these 5 guys that happen to get sucked into his antimatter black hole, his drama. Yeah. It's literally the universe. So as much as they want to help him, they just can't. They just can't. And I think that's another interesting aspect of the Doctor that we get to see here. And, we see it a little bit with the 4th Doctor, where he's like, I should kill these Daleks, but that's not my call. The Doctor does have, I think, a little bit more of an individuality aspect to his morality, that he can see past things. He can see other layers, whereas the Time Lords are like, okay, this guy's evil. We got to get everybody here to fix the planet because he's screwing us over. But the Doctor can see all the layers of that. And Omega really is a very tragic character. And I absolutely love, I have to say this too, I love that Doctor Who hires so many, well, and they do, because pretty much most actors in England grow up with some sort of, they have some sort of Shakespearean training.
Right.
But these Doctor Who actors who have worked with the Royal Shakespeare Company or any other sort of Shakespearean group, they are just good at what they do, no matter what they're in. They're just actors. They're professionals. And he delivers his lines so well. He's
You're
got
talking
that
about
great...
Stephen Thorne.
Stephen Thorne, yeah.
The guy who plays Omega.
Yeah, Omega. He's got that great booming voice, and even though he's delivering ridiculous dialogue when you break it down and think of it, he is, by God, he's doing it to the best that he can, and he delivers a wonderful performance, and Omega becomes a very complex character that you are scared of, but you pity at the same time, and he's just wonderful to listen to. So, I just have to shout out to Stephen Thorne for that great job that he did.
Yeah, he goes all in, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, he sure does.
Yeah.
He's not just sitting there going, okay, this is the children's show that I'm going to do to pay the rent this month. He's like, no, I was given a job and I'm going to do it. I'm going to do this job to the best of my abilities. And he really does it.
Yeah, and that's probably why they brought him back to play some other big bads, because he's one of those very over the top theatrical actors. But for a character like Omega, it works really well, I think.
It's exactly what you need for Omega. Omega,
right. This big, larger than life figure.
Larger than the universe.
With this big, booming voice that
created
resonates.
This entire matter universe from sheer will. You can't have just a meek sounding little guy doing that. You've got to have that big booming voice. Otherwise it does not work. And he really makes this work.
Yeah. I don't think you could have Steve Buscemi as Omega. Just saying.
It's hilarious. Buscemi is when he plays.
Right.
It's that's a comedy. This is a.
Well, he's done drama. He did Boardwalk Empire. Remember?
He did, but did you see that show with Daniel Radcliffe where God is played by Steve Buscemi?
No,
I saw pieces of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I cannot think of the name of it right now off the top of my head. I'll have to look it up and tell you later. But
okay.
Yeah, Steve Buscemi's God. It's hilarious, but you can't. But the deal is, God has a bunch of like civil servant workers doing his bidding, so he doesn't have to be being booming. He's got a little bit more 5 Christmas tree monsters.
That's funny. All right, Jesse, how about you? What are your thoughts on our big bad Omega and those ne'er-do-well Time Lords that are always up to no good?
So my first thought is I felt like a kid again. It's it's not Dark Seed, it's Dark Side, Jesse.
Right.
It's not Omega, it's Omega.
Right.
So that was my first thought.
Pronunciation is important on Doctor Who. Just saying.
Yes, it is. I thought this was a very interesting villain, and it does show the extreme that the Time Lords set themselves up. The idea that they can, the very name Time Lords, as in they control everything, shows their arrogance. It shows their
Pomposity.
why. Yes, and then to see, as much as I love having Gallifrey exist, and I did not like the latest decision temporarily to show there wasn't a Gallifrey in the latest series. I like them there, if nothing else, just as a reminder to the Doctor of what he ran away from. And I know it's not all of them. I love when you see a decent Time Lord in the classic Who.
Like Romana.
Yeah, that they are, yes, while they may be very confident and very, they are not all of them are this arrogant. I also think it's interesting that as often as they've had to go to the Doctor to save their bacon, they resent him that they've had to do that. And you see this very early, right? That they call on him, they don't know what else to do. They get this 3 versions of the Doctor, but then they're almost angry that they had to do that. And because
it
here's this rebel,
almost.
Yes, exactly. That's perfectly said, Charles. He tasks me. He tasks me.
Right. And we're back to Wrath of Khan, just like that.
Yes, exactly.
All roads lead to Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
There you go.
And I thought it was a great reveal that just his will or his actual desire, his body doesn't exist anymore, and really the only way they can release him is through the undiscovered country, if we're going to keep it in Star Trek themes. And
now we're going to do a Star Trek podcast. We keep talking Star Trek.
Yes. So it just was a really well done. And I also thought of this latest twist with the new series about how much is of what the Doctor been led to believe is all facts. And, now about regenerations and discovering time travel, is this necessarily true? So great villain, great epic for a 10th anniversary. It lived up to the expectations, and a really good villain that you didn't need a lot of other smaller creatures or, necessarily. It's just a
Well, they did have those weird bubble blob things.
Yeah, that's true. I'd forgotten about that.
What I call the bubbleoids.
Did it remind anybody else of those squish toys that came in the webbing that you could just squeeze and you get the bubbles, and then when you let go, they go back?
Yes, a little bit. And also, like, how it almost looks like a elementary kid went crazy at the art shop to decorate it and color it, like, oh, look, see what I did? And it's like, wow, that looks weird, but okay, way to go, Junior. But yes, I love the villains, and I thought it was really well done.
All right. Holly, how about you? What are your thoughts?
Omega was really interesting. I mean, for him to have that much will to set that up, and did we ever find out kind of what the Time Lords did to tick him off? It's just like, wow, that's
I think it's more like he was the victim of an accident. The fact of creating this this revolutionary solar engineering process, that he fell victim to it and got shunted into the antimatter universe.
And then nobody looked for him.
Right.
They just assumed he was dead.
They either thought he was dead, and that was it. Yeah.
this, I mean, for him to be, to have that built up that long, understandable, but then it's just like, okay. I mean, and the Time Lords are just like, oh, okay, he's alive. We need to nip this in the bud. I mean, and the Time Lords, not as devious as what they become in later years, so it was kind of refreshing to see this. Like, the other shoe was going to drop.
Right. But at this time, they weren't, at this period, they weren't as horrible as they eventually become, right?
Mm-hmm.
Still pretty arrogant, though.
Yeah.
Like Jesse pointed out. All right. Any other thoughts about the Omega or the Time Lords, Holly?
I think I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, I personally, for me, I love Omega as a villain. I think he's a very compelling villain. I think, like Xan pointed out, he's got an interesting story. He's this Time Lord that was a solid engineer, a scientist. So, in the process of creating this amazing thing, this big revolutionary thing for Time Lord society, so that they could become Time Lords, that he fell victim to it, and which also makes him, like Xan said, a very tragic figure. And Stephen Thorne plays this so well. Yes, he's a little over the top theatrical, but like I said, I think you need that for this type of character, especially when you're dealing with someone who we eventually find out is nothing left but will. That's all that's there. I mean, inside that mask and those robes, you lift up the mask, there's literally nothing there. All it is just his sheer force of will holding his consciousness together. Everything else has been completely destroyed. So it's that strength of will and that hatred for the Time Lords that enables him to continue to exist and not disperse. So, a very unique villain in that regard, and I find him really compelling. And I like, yes, he's all about revenge against the Time Lords. I'll get them back for the way they treated me. So I'll steal all their power, and they won't be able to do anything about it. And I'll eventually steal the power from the universe as a result. So I can get back to the main universe. But the Time Lords, they kind of have to eat a little crow. They talk a lot of crap about the Doctor. They put him on trial. They like we talked about. They took one of his lives, forced him to regenerate, sent him on exile on 20th century Earth of all times, and forced him to live out his existence there. So, but they realized that of all the people, of all the other Time Lords, in their vast society, that they need the Doctor to stop Omega. So they have to kind of like, okay, we're going to help the Doctor, and they see that the third Doctor needs help. So they say, God damn it, we have to or Rassilon, damn it, in this case. We have to bring in another Doctor to help the third Doctor. So.
Sorry we treated you like crap, but we need help.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like,
please.
yeah, we totally killed one of your incarnations, and we exiled you. But if you could do us a solid and help us with this Omega problem thing, we'd be really appreciative. And okay, well, looks like you need some help. So here's another Doctor. Oh, it looks like, you two aren't really getting along with one another. So here's an attempt at another Doctor, only that goes sideways, and the first Doctor gets trapped in that time eddy and can only advise them. But ultimately they decide, well, hey, we'll just use the last of our power to project you into the antimatter universe so you can advise them one last time. So yeah, they had to kind of eat some crow. They dismiss the Doctor. They've hated the Doctor for being this renegade that abandoned their society and it stole a TARDIS and ran away. And here they have, they have to rely on him, and I'm sure that really eats at them as a result. Just great stuff. And it makes for a fun little episode. I really like seeing the Time Lords in their black and white uniforms in this story.
Yeah.
They don't get the funny hats with the big ass collars till the Tom Baker era. So, I kind of like this one. I mean, it's very sleek and a stark black and white. It's very interesting. These uniforms
And understated.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's not so ostentatious as later years in that regard.
Yeah, when he says they're a dandy and a clown, I'm like,
Right.
oh, dude, just wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, wait till you see the robes you're going to be wearing later on, right?
Paraphrase.
Colin Baker is just waiting in the wings going, wait till you get a load of me.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
Heck yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, or to quote Eric Roberts' master in the TV movie, I always dress for the occasion.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, I really like that. And, I think one of the things I love most about the story is that it adds so much mythos to the Doctor Who universe. That it really explores their society a little bit, gives us something. We only got a little bit of a taste in the War Games, and here, we get quite a bit of Time Lord knowledge in this second appearance. So,
And possibly even a little foreshadowing to the fourth Doctor, because the second Doctor, I think, asks one of the others before they continue on, care for a jelly baby, or was...
Yes.
Or did
I wondered.
Yeah,
I was wondering if anybody picked up on that. Yeah, it's like we get some pre-Tom Baker jelly baby action in this story. So how freaked out was everybody realizing that Patrick Troughton originated that jelly baby bit?
I was so excited to see a nod to the jelly babies.
Yes. My ears perked up and I had to backtrack. I was like, did I just hear what I thought I just heard? I'm like, I did.
Yeah, I love that. I thought it was really kind of a nice little nod. And, you wonder if later, when they're writing, going, hey, what didn't he offer candy once before? What if we make this an ongoing bit? So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is. So I like that. I like that a lot. All right. Anybody else have anything about this story they want to share before we move on?
I don't.
All right.
Well,
What you got, Xan?
there is one thing about this story that I thought was kind of strange.
Yeah.
Is that if you were in the middle of an exile and you ran into your former self pre-exile,
When you warn that other self?
you warn yourself like, okay, dude, that thing you did, don't do it, because we're going to get stuck here and all we're going to have is a yellow car and the Brigadier. All right.
Kind of like the letter that Marty sends Doc.
Yeah.
Or even just like, if you guys get married and have kids and one of them happens to set fire to the living room carpet, go easy on him. And I felt like I would have loved to have seen something like that, but he is kind of following the
he's all about the web of time.
Law.
Yeah, he's all about the web of time.
He's following the time law, even though he is forbidden to interfere with Time Lord history, as they say. So I thought that was...
you are forbidden to interfere with Time Lord history.
You are forbidden. So I thought that was a little bit like, dude, warn him, and you could totally get out of this exile, but he does get out of the exile anyway. So it all works out in the end. But the only thing I would say on this one is that, like, I feel kind of mad at Jon Pertwee for saying, oh, there's too many other people besides me in this show.
Right.
Because I would have liked to have seen at least one companion with every Doctor.
Right.
Maybe we could
with the Hartnell Doctor.
Maybe think Susan.
Yeah, with the Hartnell Doctor, it kind of made sense because he's trapped in that time eddy, but Troughton should have had a companion.
Mm-hmm.
Troughton should have had a companion, or even something like, even like Susan could have showed up and said, grandfather, I picked up on your brain waves or something like that.
Right.
It's nice to have at least a companion for every doctor that was in the TARDIS at the time. So that was a little disappointing. I mean, it would have kind of jam-packed it through, but I'm just saying one companion would have been nice.
Well, remember I talked about, that if they originally went with their plan to have Jamie there, and all it would have done is really taken away from Benton's lines in the story. So they could have done at least one companion, right?
Yeah.
True. That's true. Yep.
Or it would have been interesting if they kept Benton and then had Benton and Jamie kind of duke it out over Joe a little bit.
I think they would have gotten
that would have been
along.
adorable.
I think they would have gotten along personally.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just
They
a
would've-
little bit of the friendly rivalry for Joe's attention.
Right. Like just that, both of them are trying to pull her chair out at the same time. Like that kind of little gentlemanly competition for the hand of the lady.
Yeah.
That would have been cute.
Yeah. One little interesting bit of trivia was that I didn't share was that Jon Pertwee, I guess, kept getting called out by Patrick Troughton during the filming of this because Pertwee would always try to position Stephen Thorne out of the way so that the camera would be on him.
My gosh.
And Troughton's like, what are you doing? Like, you have to have the monster in the shot.
Yeah.
All of this Shatner-esque
Yeah. A little bit.
drama that is not necessary.
A little bit. I mean, I'm trying not to speak ill of Jon Pertwee, but I'm just saying it happened.
Well, what better trait than egotism to have if you're going to play the Doctor in the first place?
That's true. It's probably why he played the
Translates
Doctor so
well
well,
for the
right?
character.
Yeah.
Yeah, translates well for the character.
All right. Especially the third Doctor, right? He was a little bit stuffy in that regard. The dandy.
Mm-hmm.
So
He
yeah.
was.
So it
He
fit
was.
pretty well.
I mean, I'm not going to say anything bad about Pertwee either. I love his Doctor.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. If there's nothing else, what's everybody's? Let's do favorite quotes first. So, I know we've already talked a couple of favorite quotes, but Jesse, you got any favorite quotes you want to share?
So we've kind of already talked about this, but just to make it official,
Yeah.
The second Doctor going, "Oh, I can see you've been doing the TARDIS up a bit. I don't like it." And I smiled so much because
the first time that happens, right?
Yeah, it's just really good. And then the only other one I have is the first Doctor going, "Oh, so you're my replacements. A dandy and a clown. Have you done anything?" And the second Doctor, "Well, we've assessed the situation." And first Doctor, "Just as I thought. Nothing." And just the arrogance of that, like cutting him off. Like, no, you've done nothing. Those are my two.
Yeah, those are good ones. But yeah, the first Doctor had like zero time for the second Doctor saying, "Well, yeah, we've assessed."
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it means you've done nothing. Yeah. Nothing
Code
active.
for no plan.
Yeah. Exactly. Holly, what about you? You got any quotes, Holly?
I've got a few. Let me explain it simply. I am he, and he is me, and we are all together. Goo goo choo.
Yep.
Third Doctor and Joe.
Yeah, I like that one. And then,
That was
Joe has to explain that it's a song by the Beatles, specifically "I Am the Walrus" from Magical Mystery Tour, one of my favorite Beatle albums, by the way.
And the second Doctor's just like, "Ooh, can I play it?"
Yeah, how does that go?
How does it go?
Yeah, give me a couple of notes. I'll hum it, or on my recorder, I guess. All
and
right.
then I have a couple more, but I'll wait.
Okay, all right, that's fair. Very generous. Xan, how about you? I know you've got to have a couple quotes on this, right?
Well, honestly, I think Holly doesn't have to wait because you guys both took mine. Because I love, I love the dandy and the clown quote.
Right.
I've always loved that, and it's like I think of that now whenever I am thinking of how to describe all of the Doctors, and it's like, well, Jon Pertwee's the dandy. I love the Beatles quote because as they were saying it, I was singing it in my head, and then when Joe says it, I'm like,
me too.
Thank you, Joe. That's where my brain was.
Yep.
And I also really love the line about, oh, you've done the TARDIS up. I don't like it. Because I think that sets up that pattern of the Doctor not only redoing his wardrobe when he regenerates, but also redoing his TARDIS, and that
the desktop theme,
the desktop theme, and how every Doctor, if they see it, if every previous Doctor sees the subsequent Doctor's TARDIS, they never like it. And when you go back and watch these older episodes, you can really tell that there is a genuine love there from, Stephen Moffat and Russell T Davies, and not so much J&T, but there really is a love of these old established tropes from Doctor Who, that you can tell that when they brought this series back in the early 2000s, that they were really doing their homework on this, that these were guys that loved this show and loved the messages there. And that whole thing where it starts with, I don't like your TARDIS. I love that, because it was the beginning of something that we've seen forever since then. So I really liked that. And then I also loved the very end where what's his name's wife is like, where have you been? Military's been searching for you. You didn't come home for supper. I've been worried sick. And he just looks at her, he's like, you would not believe me if I told you, is supper ready?
Right.
Yeah.
Like matter of fact, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just get my dinner now? I've had a day. Okay.
Mr. Alice, I think.
That's what everybody probably has to say to their
spouse,
to their friends. Like, so what you've been, like, imagine if, Rose Tyler goes to a high school reunion. So Rose, what you been up to? Don't even ask me questions like that. It's just not going to.
I was trapped in this parallel Earth, and I got separated from my doctor, and then I had to, tolerate getting this low rent doctor replacement. So
And it's like, where even when she shows up after being missing for 9 months, where have you been? I don't even know what to tell you. So I love that quote. He's like, yeah, you wouldn't believe when I told you. Where is dinner actually ready? I thought that was great.
That was a great way. That was a great way to end the episode too.
It's a great way to end the episode, and there's really no explaining what you've been through with the doctor.
Right. All right. Let's see. What other quotes are left? So many good ones. So
the break.
Let's see. Go ahead.
As long as he does the job, he can wear whatever face he likes.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yes, that was a really good. I liked him. Like, I don't care. Yes.
Yeah. One of my favorite lines in this is Troughton, where he is just after he shortly arrived in the TARDIS for the first time, in this story, and he goes, "Oh dear, we are in trouble, aren't we?"
Mm-hmm.
Just a kind of a little bit of a put down that only he can save the day. And lastly, one of the quotes toward the end of the story was Joe Grant, after the second Doctor leaves, she goes, "Pity, he was so sweet." And the third Doctor says, "Yes, wasn't I?" And the Brigadier chimes in and goes, "Yes, well, as far as I'm concerned, Doctor, one of you is enough. More than enough."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a good point. It is. Yes.
Yeah.
So I thought that was good. All right. Any other quotes?
Just kind of the second Doctor's plan when Benton asks him, "What are we going to do for that orby red blobby moving thing?"
Mm-hmm.
Keep it confused. Feed it with useful information or useless information. I wonder if I have a television set handy.
I thought that was cute too. I always find it funny when people who are on television are completely decrying television.
Right.
I always find that to be a hilarious trope.
That was good. All right. So what's everybody's ratings? Jesse, I'll start with you first.
So you guys have already kind of mentioned it, but I'm going 9 out of 10. I am the Walrus song lyrics.
Yeah,
I really like this one a lot.
All right. This kind of hit all your buttons for a classic era story.
Absolutely, it really did.
All right, Holly, how about you?
9 out of 10 recorders that are actually in tune.
All right, so 9 so far. Zan, how about you?
9 out of 10 Easter egg doorways.
All right. Well, I'm
Nice.
gonna be a real jerk if I don't go along with everybody. So I'm gonna go at 9 out of 10 as well. I'll give it 9 out of 10. Empty Omega masks.
Ooh, good one.
Thank you.
Ooh, that's real good.
So 9's all around for everybody. A lot of people, like Jesse said, kind of dismiss this story, but I have no idea why. It's such a fun story, and it was the first multi-doctor story. So, you get a lot of first in this episode. You get, the Brigadier and Benton in the first time in the TARDIS. You get the Doctor getting out of his exile. So, just a lot of great things. First Omega appearance. So,
Can we just have a moment of reverence for the loss of Miss Bessie, please?
yes.
Yes.
That's
always so sad when we have to lose Bessie.
That's right. Although one of the things I thought was interesting, I was watching the story, was I noticed that when they had showed Bessie in the quarry, and nobody had driven Bessie at this point, and Bessie already had
Tracks.
Well, not only tracks, but also gravel all over the tires, like it had been wheeled in there. But if it just materialized, there's no way the gravel would be on top of those tires.
Well, Charles, Bessie is an old car, and she doesn't have very good parking brakes anymore. So she just rolled around a little bit.
She does roll around a little bit, yeah. Maybe
she started up on the top of that rock, and then she just kind of rolled back down it. So
there you go.
That explains that for you.
Or maybe she took herself for a drive. It's certainly possible with Bessie.
You never know with Bessie. She could do whatever the hell she wants.
Exactly.
Maybe the TARDIS and Bessie made a little compromise, and the TARDIS did a little jiggery pokery, and Bessie can roam wherever she pleases.
Pretty much.
Yeah, the TARDIS sent Bessie out to do reconnaissance mission before everybody else got there.
Stealth Bessie. No.
Stealth Bessie. Ooh, I would watch that show.
Ninja Bessie.
Yeah, Ninja Bessie. That would be on, K9 and Company's on at 9:30, and
there you
Stealth
go.
Bessie. And I would totally watch that.
That would make a great, half-hour block, of television. Yeah. All right. Well, get on that, BBC. I'm just saying. All right. Reverse the polarity, because, we're going to reverse it, then we're going to reverse it back again. So this one should be pretty obvious, I would think. So you had the 3 doctors that we're talking about. So, of course, I have to recommend The Day of the Doctor, right? The 50th anniversary special written by Stephen Moffat. I won't go into the full story, but, obviously you've got, this story features, instead of the Brigadier, it features the Brigadier's daughter, Kate Stewart. You've got, instead of Doctors 1, 2, and 3, you have the 3 doctors, the War Doctor, the 10th Doctor, and the 11th Doctor joining forces. And you also have the Time Lords on Gallifrey. So there's a lot of great comparisons here. And, the 50th anniversary special, and I think in a lot of ways echoes a lot of the things that we talked about here in this 10th anniversary story.
Yeah, this was definitely the print for that.
Yeah, it is. So if you've watched the 3 Doctors, you definitely want to go through the marathon and eventually, definitely want to check out The Day of the Doctor. If you haven't seen it already, and if for all 2 of you that may have not seen the story by now, listening to this podcast. All right, listener feedback. We only have one because, Holly is here with us, which we obviously prefer. We always prefer to talk to Holly. But since she's not here to write an email, we have Dave Proctor writing in solo this time. Jesse, do you want to read Dave's, or should I?
I have it up, so I'll be glad to do.
Yeah, go for it.
Hello in the TARDIS.
Hello, Dave.
Yes, I have to imagine that the first time this aired, that longtime fans were very excited. One didn't get to see the previous Doctors whenever they want, like we do. This has also started a precedent that is occasionally redone in modern times. I especially enjoyed the Brigadier's reaction to seeing Patrick Troughton's Doctor again. It's sad that William Hartnell was unable to participate more fully. One issue I have with the premise is that the second and third Doctors show deference to the first Doctor. I get that he is the original, at least is the original as far as they can remember. Who knows how many Doctors there were before Hartnell, according to the Whittaker revelation in The Timeless Children. Each new Doctor will have all the experiences of the previous, thusly would be wiser. This serves the audience and Hartnell the most. The other two don't like each other, but how does two even know three? Neither one should know either of them. Well, that little issue aside, you have to love multiple Doctors for the price of one. I give this 7.5 antimatter annihilations. Have a good week. Thanks, Dave Proctor. Thank you, Dave. As always, we love you. I think it's because they just immediately are kind of like two magnets repelling each other, right? That just because they're so similar, as we've talked a lot about tonight.
Right. I'm pretty sure that's it. And maybe when the second Doctor arrived, maybe there was some like unknown scene or like off-camera scene where the Time Lords said, "Hey, you're going to meet your future incarnation." Who knows?
Yeah.
All right. But always great to hear from Dave and Holly, of course, when she's not here. She's always so great. You're always so great, Holly, about writing in. So we definitely appreciate you writing in as well. And if you want to be like Dave, and you do, write to us, nextstopeverywhere@smg@gmail.com. That's Next Stop Everywhere for SMG for Southgate Media Group @gmail.com. Or you can find us on Twitter @NextStopSMG on Twitter. Facebook, of course, Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast, and Instagram Next Stop Everywhere podcast. And we definitely would love it if you like to follow us there and shared our links with your friends. We definitely appreciate that. And Jesse, we'll start with you. Where can they find all the other things that you're doing when you're not talking Doctor Who here on Next Stop Everywhere?
Well, I am about to start spending my time in my day job getting ready for summer, but for now, I am podcasting on Set Lessing Bruce, the Bruce Springsteen podcast, where I am talking to fans from around the world, Bruce Springsteen and his music. I just spent a Sunday, I had a great interview with a writer that the McSweeney's is the website, and she did is it Stephen King or is it Bruce Springsteen quiz and it was absolutely amazing how she was able to find a Stephen King and Springsteen kind of connection together. And so I'm doing that. And then How Many? Where me and a bunch of my buddies here in Dallas get together and talk sports and pop culture. We just did a special on the Cowboys signing Dak Prescott, and so I really would appreciate How Many is it takes four of us to have as much pop culture and funny banter as that Charles and Xan do alone in Drunk
Inconceivable.
Cinema. But it is always a lot of fun. Xan, how about you? When you're not hanging out with us, what are you appearing in?
If I'm not hanging out with you guys in my real life, I'm pretty much going into stasis, frankly.
Are you saying we're monopolizing your time?
No, I'm just saying that this is the most interesting thing I do during the week is talk to you guys. As you mentioned, Jesse, Charles and I imbibe adult beverages and discuss some of our favorite movies. That includes basic opinions and trivia and drunken nonsensical thoughts on Drunk Cinema. And we also share our love and our encyclopedic knowledge of Twin Peaks and all things tangentially related to Twin Peaks and David Lynch on Ghost with the Twin Peaks podcast. And then I get to class it up a little bit with DJ Nick and Rachel Friend as we talk about the winners of the Best Picture Oscar on Gold Standard, the Oscars podcast. So, if you want to hear me listen to my favorite films that might not be the world's greatest films, you got Drunk Cinema. You want to hear me talk about the creme de la creme, you got Gold Standard. So I like to run the gamut of my pop culture love and encyclopedic knowledge that's useless everywhere but here.
But you do it so well.
Well, I'm just glad that my encyclopedic knowledge that I gained as an introvert that would rather watch things and read things than go to the parties that terrified me. It's finally paying off.
I don't know what you're talking about. That never happened to me. Oh, wait, it did.
Charles,
Totally.
someday I'll try to get you to understand what it's like to be an introverted only child whose parents don't understand your fandoms. I'll try and get you to understand that.
Oh, wait.
Someday.
Yeah, I might know a little bit about that. Maybe. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. All right. Maybe that's why we get along so well. All right. So, Holly, how about you? I have an idea where they can find you, but why don't you share that with us anyway?
Well, you can find me as 1/5 of the Five-ish Fangirls podcast. You can find us on Facebook, our website, the5ishfangirls.com. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at hollymac_79.
Excellent. And please do.
Yes.
Please check out the Five-ish Fangirls podcast, and because Holly, you're always so supportive of our shows, and you're also supportive of us on the Phantom Zone podcast. So everybody, give Holly all the love and go out there and support everything she does. She's fantastic.
Absolutely agree.
Highly recommended. All right. So as for me, at Charles Skaggs on Twitter, at Charles Skaggs on Instagram. Facebook, of course, Charles Skaggs in Hilliard, Ohio, and my blog of geeky things.
Damn good coffee. And hot.
Damn Good Coffee and Hot, where I talk about all the stuff we talk about here in Next Stop Everywhere. So Doctor Who, Torchwood, The Sarah Jane Adventures, Big Finish, Audios, and more. All kinds of comic book sci-fi news of my other podcasts for Southgate Media Group, including, the aforementioned Ghostwood, the Twin Peaks podcast that I do with Xan, where we talk all things Twin Peaks, David Lynch, and currently we are about to talk our third and final episode of the really obscure 1992 ABC sitcom series On the Air that features a lot of Twin Peaks actors, was executive produced by Mark Frost and David Lynch. And this has been a really trippy blast from the past for yours truly, because a lot of these episodes I haven't watched for 25 years or so. So it's been a serious trip, and I'm really enjoying it. Really enjoying talking about it. I hope everybody else is as well. And Drunk Cinema, like Xan says, where we talk adult beverages, we talk adult conversation, and we drink and watch movies. And they're our favorite movies, and we want to share them with you guys. So we encourage you to watch them along with us. And we have a ball doing that. We just recently discussed for our 007th episode, we discussed Goldfinger from the Sean Connery James Bond era. And then coming up, by Zan's request, we're going to be discussing Forbidden Planet, where we go back to the 1950s of sci-fi classic that features Leslie Nielsen decades before the Naked Gun films or Airplane. And this is something that I have not seen in its entirety. So Xan is educating me a little bit in this regard.
You're really going to love it, Charles. It's a great film. It's not just a classic. I mean, it really stands up as a good film. You're going to have a good time.
And then after that, I'm going to turn the tables on her, and we're going to discuss a movie that she hasn't seen. So we'll see how that goes, right? But I'm not going to spoil.
Are you going to reverse the polarity of Drunk Cinema?
I'm going to reverse the polarity of the Drunk Cinema flow. Yes, exactly.
That works.
All right. And then lastly, but certainly not leastly, the Phantom Zone podcast they do with DJ Nick, whom you've heard here on Next Stop Everywhere, where right now we're talking The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And we just did the second episode of that. And this has so far been another great series from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where this time, it's more Captain America-centric. And I'm really enjoying this because, as far as I'm concerned, Captain America is the best superhero film trilogy that's out there. It's one of the things we talked about during the Phantom Zone podcast. We try to compare and contrast. And as far as I'm concerned, all three Captain America movies were solid, which you cannot say that about a lot of superhero movies and their various trilogies. I had a lot of fun with that. We're going to keep talking that for about 4 more episodes, and then we'll see what we talk about next as we discuss more comic book TV on the Phantom Zone podcast. And hopefully we'll get Jesse Jackson back on there because, we miss you, Jesse. And
thank you, Charles. I appreciate it.
Hopefully it won't be too long before you grace our presence once again. So everybody, thank you so much for listening out there. Everyone here, thank you so much for what I thought was a really fun discussion about the Three Doctors.
Absolutely agree.
And I hope
It was
everyone
great.
enjoyed it as much as I did, because I had a ball talking with all three of you.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to Holly and Xan. We always love having you guys on the podcast. You're welcome anytime. And Xan, we still got to figure out how to get you on Set Listing Bruce, so I'm working on that.
That work. I'm still I'm still ready to be the outlier who talks about how much she loves Tunnel of Love.
Sounds awesome. All right, we're going to make that happen soon. Sounds good.
Something tells me he'll find a way to make that happen. I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
All right. So, like I said, Holly, thank you. Zan, thank you. Jesse, thank you as always. Had a ball. And then coming up next time at Next Stop Everywhere, episode 226, as... We're getting back to Torchwood month. So it's April, and we're going back to Torchwood once again. We're going to be doing that for 4 episodes. And the
Charles?
first... Yes?
I have one question for you.
Okay, what's your question?
Who the hell is ordering pizza under the name Torchwood?
Thank you, yes.
It's me.
That's my favorite. I mean, I love Torchwood. I love the whole thing. My favorite quote from Torchwood is, "Who the hell is ordering pizza under the name Torchwood?"
Yeah. Was it Yanto or was it Owen? I can't remember.
It was Owen.
That
It
makes
was
sense.
Owen.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it was Owen that did it.
The bad boy, yes.
Pot kettle having Torchwood emblazoned on the side of their vehicle
Yeah, thank you.
in the
Yeah,
first
exactly.
season.
Yeah, go figure, right? So we're going to start off Torchwood month once again, only this time we're going to discuss They Keep Killing Susie, which was a story from the first season of Torchwood, Series 1. And I thought this was interesting because we get the return of Susie Costello, played by Indira Varma, who you've seen on lots of other things like Rome or Game of Thrones or you name it. She's been on just about everything. It's just going to be Jesse and I for this one, although we are going to have special guest companions for the next 3. But for this first one, unless we have any volunteers, we're going to be discussing this one just you and me, Jesse, and I hope you're okay with that.
That sounds great. I always love going old school. I appreciate it.
All right. So that's what we got to look forward to. Everybody, thank you so much for listening again. Keep listening. Come on back for episode 226, They Keep Killing Susie, as we return to Torchwood month right here on Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. Goodbye, everybody.